Ivan Ilyin's Our Tasks, the philosophical blueprint that shaped modern Russia. Introduction: The Forgotten Prophet's Vision. What happens when the philosophical writings of a long-dead émigré become the ideological cornerstone of a modern superpower? Ivan Alexandrovich Ilyin's Our Tasks, Nashi Zadechi, represents one of the most intriguing cases of intellectual resurrection in contemporary politics. Written during his exile in the 1940s and in the 1950s, this collection of essays has emerged as a foundational text for understanding not just Russian political philosophy, but the very foundations of Vladimir Putin's worldview and governance approach. The story begins with a man who witnessed the collapse of Imperial Russia, lived through the Bolshevik Revolution, and spent his final decades in European exile, dreaming of his homeland's spiritual renewal. Ilyin's Our Tasks wasn't merely an academic exercise, it was a desperate attempt to preserve Russian civilization's essence while charting a path for its eventual resurrection. Little did he know that his words would one day echo through the Kremlin's corridors of power. The philosopher of Russian destiny, Ivan Ilyin, emerged from the intellectual ferment of pre-revolutionary Russia as a legal philosopher and political thinker whose ideas would prove remarkably prescient. His background as a professor of law at Moscow University before his 1922 expulsion on the philosopher's ship shaped his systematic approach to political theory. But Our Tasks reveals something far more profound than mere academic theorizing. It unveils a comprehensive vision for Russian national renewal that reads like a prophecy of contemporary Russian politics. The central premise of Our Tasks revolves around what Ilyin termed the Russian spiritual crisis. He argued that Russia's problems stemmed not from economic or political failures alone, but from a fundamental spiritual collapse that began with the abandonment of traditional Orthodox values. This diagnosis would later resonate powerfully with Putin's own rhetoric about Russia's need for spiritual and moral renewal in the post-Soviet era. Ilyin's concept of spiritual monarchy forms the philosophical backbone of his political vision. Unlike Western democracy, which he viewed as fundamentally alien to Russian nature, Ilyin proposed a system where authority flows from spiritual legitimacy rather than popular mandate. The ruler, in this framework, serves as the embodiment of national will and orthodox values, a concept that finds remarkable echoes in Putin's presentation of himself as Russia's spiritual guardian. The architecture of authoritarian legitimacy. What makes Our Tasks particularly compelling is Ilyin's sophisticated justification for authoritarian governance. Rather than crude power worship, he presents a nuanced argument for why Russia requires strong, centralized leadership. His reasoning centers on what he called the Russian soul, a national character supposedly shaped by centuries of autocratic rule, orthodox spirituality, and communal values that make Western-style individualism not just inappropriate, but actively destructive. Ilyin's critique of democracy reveals a thinker wrestling with genuinely complex problems. He argued that formal democratic procedures, when transplanted to Russian soil, would inevitably lead to chaos and foreign manipulation. This isn't mere authoritarianism, it's a cultural relativist argument about political systems' compatibility with national character. The parallels to Putin's frequent assertions that Western democratic models are incompatible with Russian values are unmistakable. The philosopher's concept of creative freedom provides another crucial element of his political philosophy. Unlike liberal notions of freedom as absence of constraint, Ilyin proposed that true freedom emerges from voluntary submission to higher spiritual and national purposes. Citizens achieve authentic liberty not through individual rights, but through participating in the nation's sacred mission. This idea permeates Putin's rhetoric about Russian citizens' duties to their homeland and civilization. Putin's philosophical inheritance. The connection between Ilyin's philosophy and Putin's governance approach isn't merely circumstantial, it's documented and deliberate. Putin has repeatedly referenced Ilyin's works in speeches, and the Russian government has actively promoted his writings as essential reading for understanding Russian identity. In 2005, Putin personally oversaw the repatriation of Ilyin's remains from Switzerland to Moscow's Donskoy Monastery, treating the philosopher as a returning national hero. Putin's famous Munich Security Conference speech in 2007, where he challenged the unipolar world order, echoes Ilyin's warnings about Western cultural imperialism. The philosopher argued that Russia's greatest threat came not from military conquest, but from spiritual colonization, the gradual erosion of Russian values through exposure to alien ideologies. Putin's subsequent policies, from restrictions on NGOs to emphasis on traditional values, reflect this Ilyinian concern about foreign influence. The concept of sovereign democracy that emerged during Putin's presidency bears striking resemblance to Ilyin's arguments about Russian exceptionalism. Just as Ilyin argued that Russia required its own unique political forms, Putin has consistently maintained that Russian democracy must develop along distinctly Russian lines, free from Western interference or models. The geopolitical vision, Ilyin's geopolitical thinking in Our Tasks, reveals a thinker grappling with Russia's relationship to both East and West. He rejected both Western liberalism and Eastern despotism, arguing that Russia represented a unique civilization requiring its own path. His concept of Russia as a bridge between Europe and Asia, while maintaining its distinct identity, prefigures Putin's Eurasian integration projects and his complex relationship with both Western powers and Asian neighbors. The philosopher's warnings about the fragmentation of Russian space prove particularly prophetic. Writing during the early Cold War, Ilyin feared that prolonged division would lead to the permanent weakening of Russian civilization. His emphasis on the need to maintain unity among Russian-speaking populations across different territories resonates powerfully with Putin's policies toward former Soviet republics with significant Russian minorities. Ilyin's concept of imperial consciousness doesn't advocate crude expansion, but rather a sense of civilizational responsibility. Russia, in his view, bears special obligations toward Orthodox peoples and traditional cultures threatened by modern materialism. This idea underlies Putin's presentation of Russia as a defender of traditional values against Western decadence and moral relativism, the spiritual dimension of politics. Perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of Ilyin's philosophy lies in his integration of spiritual and political concerns. Our Tasks presents politics not as mere power competition, but as spiritual warfare between different visions of human nature and social organization. This elevated view of political struggle helps explain the messianic quality often noted in Putin's rhetoric about Russia's world historical mission. Ilyin's Orthodox Christianity wasn't merely cultural decoration, but the foundation of his entire political philosophy. He argued that secular ideologies, whether liberal, socialist, or fascist, inevitably led to spiritual emptiness and social decay. Only a political system grounded in orthodox values could provide the meaning and purpose necessary for civilizational vitality. Putin's alliance with the Russian Orthodox Church and his frequent invocation of Christian values clearly draw from this Ilyinian framework. The philosopher's concept of patriotic education emphasized the need to cultivate love of homeland from childhood. His detailed discussions of how to instill national consciousness through education, culture, and ritual find direct expression in Putin's educational reforms and emphasis on patriotic upbringing for Russian youth. Contemporary relevance and global implications. The influence of Ilyin's thought extends far beyond Russia's borders. His critique of globalization as spiritual homogenization resonates with nationalist movements worldwide. Leaders from Viktor Orban to others who challenge liberal internationalism often echo themes first articulated in Our Tasks. The book's vision of distinct civilizations requiring their own political forms provides intellectual ammunition for those resisting what they see as Western cultural imperialism. Ilyin's warnings about the dangers of rapid democratization prove particularly relevant in light of various color revolutions and Arab Spring outcomes. His argument that political transformation must be gradual and culturally grounded offers an alternative to both revolutionary change and liberal interventionism. Putin's criticism of Western democracy promotion efforts directly reflects these Ilyinian concerns about imposed political change. The philosopher's emphasis on the importance of elite formation, creating a leadership class committed to national values rather than personal gain, provides a framework for understanding Putin's approach to governance. The Russian president's efforts to cultivate a patriotic elite through various institutions and programs reflect Ilyin's belief that national renewal requires dedicated leadership committed to transcendent values. The enduring questions. Our Tasks ultimately poses fundamental questions about the relationship between culture, politics, and human nature that remain relevant today. Can political institutions be successfully transplanted across different cultural contexts? Does effective governance require some form of spiritual or ideological foundation? How should traditional societies adapt to modernity while preserving their essential character? Ilyin's answers to these questions, emphasizing cultural particularity, spiritual foundation, and strong leadership, continue to influence not just Russian politics, but global debates about democracy, sovereignty, and cultural identity. Whether one agrees with his conclusions or not, the philosopher's sophisticated engagement with these issues ensures that Our Tasks remains a text of enduring significance for understanding contemporary political challenges. The book's influence on Putin's worldview demonstrates how ideas can shape history across generations. From a forgotten émigré's writings to the foreign policy of a global superpower, Ilyin's philosophical legacy illustrates the enduring power of ideas to shape political reality. In understanding Our Tasks, we gain crucial insight into the intellectual foundations of contemporary Russian politics and the broader challenge of maintaining cultural identity in an interconnected world. If you liked the video, don't forget to leave a comment, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more.